People who fall asleep fast are good sleepers, and
Hmm.
people who don't wake up during the night are good sleepers. Those will be the two most common answers on the poll, most likely.
Mm, sure.
And I don't think they're good answers at all. It's kind of just degrading the nature of your sleep and your recovery just enough. Multiply that over 20 years, and you've got somebody who, when they're in their 70s, looks very different if they had taken care of their snoring versus if they hadn't. So light, food, movement, social interaction, get your body temperature up, and
Mm.
get out of your bedroom.
Hello, humans. Welcome back to another episode. Dr. Chris Winter on the show today. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like if you find it valuable. Appreciate you as always. Enjoy the episode. We dive into all things sleep, trying to cram in lots around my thoughts and Chris's on sleep and how you can maximize, optimize this fundamental human need that we all do and we can all relate to. And it's the one thing, if you improve, it will impact just about every aspect of your life. So I hope you enjoy. Again, hit that subscribe. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the episode. Firstly, this is something quite fundamental to our existence, right?
Absolutely.
It's a human need.
100%. Yeah, it's air and water.
Yeah. And I feel like we haven't valued it as much or thought about it as much until like the last 20, 30 years in a maybe academic science sense, right? I'm sure you'd agree. Um,
Yes.
but maybe first we'll talk about your background and how you got into uh, learning and basically dedicating your life to educating people about sleep, right? And also just your life growing up in what you led you on down this path, really. I think that's really crucial to give some initial backstory of how you came to be one
Sure.
of be one of the people talking about this in such a meaningful way.
I mean, I think like most people, I mean, what you said is exactly true. This was not on my radar as a young person to be a sleep specialist. I like sleeping. I always thought sleeping was fun. I never had any trouble with it. Um, but I was interested in medicine. And I think that the backstory that you often tell is, how do you come to that? Did you have parents that were doctors? Both my parents were school teachers. They were the first in their families to go to college. So, I was interested in the art of medicine. I liked literally the art. I liked drawing the human body. I liked mapping out, well, this is where one muscle attaches and this one attaches, and if they pull together, it would create this kind of motion. So I like the Latin names of the muscles. I thought that was kind of cool. So, I found a lot of peripheral things about medicine to be really nice. I think, in all honesty, there was an element of, as somebody who grew up, very middle class, with parents that were both teachers, when you'd say to somebody, I think I want to be a doctor, that elicited a response that probably was very reaffirming and encouraging. I'm sure at some point I told somebody I wanted to be a pastry chef, and I go, oh, that's good. That's fine. That's go. I like pastries, whatever. But if you say you want to be a doctor, you get real big responses from family members when you're little. And I think I started telling people I was going to be a doctor when I was in third grade or something. I've got little pictures of me in like little doctor's bags and things like that. So, you find yourself in college, and I didn't really even know what that meant. I mean, I knew what it meant. I'd been doctors before, but what do you do to be a doctor, and what kind of doctor? And so I went to a biology. My college advisor is a biology professor, and he's like, you should go work for a doctor and see if you like it, and get introduced and whatnot. And so I worked for a guy who ran the sleep lab. And I remember thinking, well, this is really cool. He was a pulmonologist, but he was in charge of the University of Virginia Sleep Center. His name was Paul Surratt, and he was just the nicest guy. He was a mentor and father figure, and just really enthusiastic and encouraging. If you'd said, look, I hate sleep, this is no good, and he'd be like, okay, well, let's figure out somebody that you might like to work with. But
Mm.
I liked it. I thought it was so new. And I remember him saying something to that effect of, yeah, the greatest thing about sleep is that whatever you've dreamt up in terms of research or something you want to explore, it's probably not been done yet.
Mm,
Unlike other fields where it's just, kind of, and you've got this fantastic public interest. There's really cool things about a kidney, the way it filters our blood. I mean, it's pretty fascinating and requires a lot of intelligence and math to figure out. Nobody cares. They care when it stops working, but the
mm,
public isn't demanding, National Kidney Day, and we're constantly getting asked for to be on podcasts because everybody loves to figure out how the salt gets exchanged for other cations. I mean, nobody, but sleep, man, people love to talk about sleep, and everybody's got a sleep story, and so it's just a really cool field and space to be in. And so that's kind of how I found my, and once I found my way into it, despite not really having designs to stay, I just never left.
mm. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it is one of. I feel a bit ashamed actually. There's a bit of shame there that I haven't had a podcast dedicated to sleep yet, and I call myself like a human health podcast that talks about the holistic side of things and not just one aspect. And I haven't really gone there yet. So this is going to be this
Well,
is
it's,
going
I
to
mean,
be.
I think that's the whole point, is that it's huge and it's hidden, right?
Mhm.
So I think that that's what's so fascinating about it. And that's how sort of the public treated it forever. It's how every professional sports organization I worked with treated it forever. But once you see, it's like the little, it's like some sort of optical illusion or some little thing where, like, the FedEx logo has a little arrow in it. And as
Mm.
soon as you point that out to somebody, you'll
Yeah.
never not be able to see it again. Like, it was there the whole time, massively. It's not hidden. It's a big arrow, FedEx. And as soon as you point it out to somebody, they'll never not see it again and think, "How did I miss that?" But that's sleep.
Hmm. Did anything feel impossible to you when you were spending time with this doctor, and you were looking ahead of like how are people gonna perhaps be start to be passionate about sleep? Or did anything feel like unachievable back then? And has that changed over time, where you've actually achieved certain things you thought that were not possible in terms of sleep and studies and understanding things are different?
It's a really great question. I think if somebody could have come back in time and said, "Hey, do you think that this massive piece of equipment that you're using could ever be shrunk down to the size of something that would fit inside of a ring or a watch?" That would have felt very impossible. At the time, even though I was absolutely enchanted by the field, it hadn't had the explosion of popularity it had had yet. So there was
Mm.
never a sort of, "Oh, I'm going to go into this field because I really think in 10 years or 20 years it's going to be all over the place." I just really thought it was important, overlooked, and had a lot of potential to it. So but I mean, I never would have thought, if somebody had said, "At some point you'll be working with a whole bunch of professional sports organizations and you'll write a couple books on this," and I would not have believed that. I just kind of thought I would go and do something, related to sleep and quietly carve out a living, and people would hopefully buy into some things. And I just had no idea the kind of popularity that it would have right now. It
Yeah, it's
wasn't like that
fascinating.
then. I mean, everybody was always interested in it. When you talk to
Mhm.
people, "What do you do?" "Oh, I'm working with this guy and doing some sleep research." "Oh, that's cool. What are you
Uh-huh.
doing?" "Oh, we got these pigs and we're doing all this stuff with them." And, "Oh, that's fantastic." Like, people were, and then when you go to a sleep meeting, I remember one time he sent me to present some research at a sleep meeting as an undergrad, and you're just like, "This is great. Everybody's into sleep here." All the people walking around are super into it, but you kind of felt like it was contained to this group. It really wasn't a public sort of sentiment, and that's really changed.
Why do you think it has changed so much? Why do people, um, people in the world of trying to improve and optimize themselves, like, well, why do you think it has changed so what. Like it seems so obvious now. Of course, sleep, it improves absolutely everything, every aspect of your life, happiness, your physical health, like all of it. It just will improve it if you optimize it. So why do you think that's shifted so much?
I think it's shifted for a bunch of reasons. I think that the first is that we really sort of put the message out there, and by we I mean everyone, you and the fitness trainers on the Fit On app that you're watching,
Mhm.
the athletes that you love are talking about it during a press conference. There's this sort of idea that sleep is not a fixed trait. I think for a long time people thought about sleep like
Mhm.
blinking or I don't know, swallowing or something. Like, well, yeah, it's super important, but you just do it. You don't really train it. You don't optimize it. It's just, I don't know, just go to bed and sleep. And he's a great sleeper and she's a terrible sleeper. And there's not much they can do about that, And so I think that as we understand more about sleep and put that information out there, people really start to see sleep like exercise or diet. It's a modifiable risk factor. So if you're interested in a healthy lifestyle, and a lot of people are. I mean, I think that I just listened to this, daily podcast about childhood obesity. I mean, it's very, very upsetting the rising amount of obesity and how little control sometimes people have over it. I think there is an opposite response of people wanting to control their health. And
Yeah.
so when you're done eating perfectly and exercising like crazy, I think sleep and mindfulness are sort of the other two pillars. Like there's the four legs of the table. And I think those two things have really captured people in terms of, hey, you tell me some things I can do for my sleep and I'll do them because I really want to live a healthy life and not be riddled with chronic disease and whatnot. So I think that it's just captured a lot of attention in terms of people feeling a positivity that they can control it. They just need good information about how to do that.
Yeah, I think if you think of human health on a spectrum, what's happened now is it's gone in two different extremes, right? You probably have got people now who are, I don't use the term much, but biohacking their way, essentially gaining more awareness of the things they need to do in the modern day to actually improve their health. And you've probably got people that are more healthy than anyone who ever existed i- in the world, like because they're so passionate and aware about it, they have the time, they have the resources and the energy to dedicate themselves to really improve their health and longevity. But then that's probably due to the amount of people in the world that have just gone the opposite way and are, I don't want to say victim, but that nature of the system and the complex world that we're a part of, right? That
Right.
just
Absolutely.
it's got so complex quite quickly that we're living in a time where if you're not aware and you're not awake, let's say, then you're gonna suffer because of uh of how much things have moved on and how easy things have, wow, how convenient things are now, and what that does to our innate natural sense to move towards comfort and away from everything else.
And you bring up a good point. I mean, there is an inherent inequity to sleep because it's sort of, well, you can buy that house, but you have to have the cash to pay for it. And it's, you can get 8 hours of sleep, but do you have 8 hours in your day to allot to sleep? Or do you work two jobs to pay a mortgage? Are you, working in terrible conditions? I just saw some sort of documentary about migrant workers that, in China that see their families once a year because they have to
Mm,
go to the place where the work is and their work conditions are extreme. So, having a conversation with that individual about, hey, it'd be really healthy if you get
yeah.
8 hours of sleep, that might not be accessible to that person. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of variables that go into the individual who decides to really prioritize and maximize their sleep.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive in then. So you touched on 8 hours. I want to really understand from you what your take is on. Do you prescribe people 8 hours? Do you go by that logic? Do you think it's a kind of catch-all term? It's pretty reasonable, and if you're generalizing, that's what you're trying to aim for. How do you feel about it? Because I think when people immediately, if you bring up sleep, they'll think 8 hours. Like it's literally comes next. So I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think that. 8 hours okay, as long as you understand that you're talking about sort of an average. It's a starting point. It's the person coming to you saying, I have no idea when I should be sleeping, what I should be doing. You know nothing about me. I've just met you. Where do I start here? And there's lots of places to start. Optimizing your bedroom, looking at the way you sleep, your schedule. But I think that the most common question I think people ask me all the time is, how much sleep do I need? And the answer is enough. I mean, but I don't know. I've just met you. I have no idea. It's sort of the
Yeah, people want
person
to.
behind a curtain saying, how much should I eat? How many calories should I eat? And you're like, well, do I get to look at you? Do I get to find anything about what you do for a living? Are you a Olympic swimmer? Are you a 70-year-old retired accountant? I need to know these things to answer your question. And we would
Mhm.
never go around prescribing 2,300 calories. Put it on t-shirts. You get your 2,300 calories. If you don't, you die. You get dementia, you get heart disease. No, well, where did you come up with 2,300? Well, that's the average amount of calories a human adult male needs. I'm making that up. I have no idea if that's true or not. But, we would never say that. I've never even heard that kind of it. We always sort of individualize nutritional information and that's because nutrition thought and science has been around forever. Like, we all get it, and we're sort of still in that sort of wild west kind of feel place of sleep. So 8 hours is a great place to start understanding that if you look at the sleep need of an adult, 8 hours is probably right there in the middle, 7.5, 8. So it's fine. I mean, if you tell that to 100 people, a lot of them are going to be like, I'm feeling great. 8 hours is perfect for me. But the people on the either ends of that bell curve, you have people coming back saying, I'm exhausted. I'm falling asleep during the day. I can barely stay awake because they need a little bit more. And maybe more importantly, you're going to have people on the other end of the spectrum saying, I can't sleep. I got to take Ambien, trazodone, Seroquel. I'm taking medications to sleep because I get in bed. It takes me, God, Chris, it takes me, sometimes it'll take me like an hour and a half to fall asleep. Well, maybe 7 is a better number for you if this is what your behavior is showing you all the time, that despite the opportunity to get 8, you're really only capable of getting 7. And that's fine. I was just out in LA yesterday. Um, and I was talking to the producer of this thing that I was doing, and he said, yeah, it always takes me about an hour to fall asleep. And we were talking, and his mother was a psychiatric nurse. His father was a surgeon. And I'm like, I bet your parents are what we call short sleepers, people who don't require quite as much sleep as the average person. They're a little bit on this side of the bell curve. And, that's genetic. So my guess is you're somebody who's a little bit under what the average person would sleep, and that's okay. Of course, he'd gotten married and his wife seemed to need more sleep. So it was just kind of creating this constant problem for him of going to bed and just sitting there for an hour waiting to sleep while his wife was, out cold immediately. So
Hmm.
sleep's very individualized. And as we start to kind of play around with our own sleep and keep diaries of sleep and wear little fitness trackers, we can start to see that pretty easily, I think. But 8's a great place to start. Just understand it may not be perfect for you, but average is, 50 shot, it probably is pretty close.
Yeah, I like the answer because you can't look for one quick fix answer, or people are trying to outsource their power essentially. So tell me what to do. And we've got into this world of, I just want someone to tell me how to do
Yeah,
this, and then I'll do it.
absolutely.
It just doesn't. It's not going to happen. It's like subscription model. This is like, it doesn't work when it comes to everyone because, yeah, as you said. So that's interesting. So the genetic situation with with certain people who, what did you say? What's the determinant factor of like the genetic?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of interesting genes. When you think about sleep, you can think about different genetic determinants. So we've talked about we can talk about genes that determine how much sleep do you need. Meaning, there's all these great experiments, and on my podcast, I did a whole episode on, I think it was on circadian rhythms. I can't remember the episode we did, but they have these great experiments where you put somebody in a cave. So this Bruce Richardson, Nathaniel Kleitman, these two sleep researchers lived in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky for a month because they wanted to see what happens to our sleep and our rhythm of sleep when we have no external cues. There was another, I think it was Swiss or German, who built a
Mm.
bunker underneath. Jürgen Aschoff, I think was his name, built a bunker underneath the ground, and graduate students at this university would sign up and live there for a month. No external cues. You could study, you could read, you could do whatever you want to do. You just couldn't look out a window or look at TV. They had a little refrigerator that somebody could walk into one door and stock up and leave and close that door, and then another door allowed the person in the bunker to access the
Yeah.
refrigerator. So you were completely cut off. So the question becomes, if you put somebody in these kinds of situations, how much sleep will they naturally gravitate towards? I ask my patients all the time. If I sent you to an all expenses paid resort, all you had to do is sit out and look at the ocean, eat good food, and sleep, what
Mm.
would your schedule become? No kids, no work. So you're trying to figure out, what do you naturally, so that's genetic. Timing is important. So are you more of a night person? Like to go to bed at 2 a.m. and get up at 10, or you're no, I like to go to bed at 9 o'clock at night and get up at 5. That's my schedule. So that's sort of genetic. And then other genetic determinants which complicate the matters are, well, what if we took 100 people and only let them sleep for 4 hours tonight or 3 hours? How do those individuals look the next day? So we'll get everybody, we'll put them to bed at 3 a.m. and we'll wake them up at 6 a.m. and send them off to work and whatever they do during a typical Monday. Some people, no problem. Like, you'd look at them and they'd be like, "Yeah, I don't feel great, but I'm going to crush it today. It's not an issue." Other people
Mm.
would be absolutely incapacitated. That school teacher would have to say, "Look, I can't do this. I can't even keep my eyes open. I'm so exhausted. I've got to get out of here and go lay down. I feel terrible. I'm going to be sick to my stomach." So that ability to absorb or deal with insufficient sleep is another genetic trait as well too, which is a real dangerous one, in the sense that if you possess it, like everybody in my medical school class seemed to possess, you you can get ahead very quickly. I mean, if you're the attending physician and you're writing recommendations about all the surgical, residents or whatever on your, and the one girl, just, she can stay up all night, operating on people, and the next day just zooms through her clinic. She's going to get the best recommendations, even though she's participating in a behavior that's going to hurt her health. So all three of those things become really important in terms of what kind of sleeper are you, and then answering those questions, how to best maximize the kind of sleep that you've got.
Yeah. I guess my next point, which I want to dive into, would be leading on from that. Is it a good thing to do? Track your sleep, get the aura ring, like really dive into that. Do you think there's merit in that? Um, I'll share my opinion after. But do you think there's merit in that? And I guess then that leads us on to the quality of sleep, because that can allow us to understand if we are getting more REM sleep, or we are getting more deeper sleep, which is the quality of a sleep, not necessarily the time, right?
Right. Correct. Absolutely. Do I think there's merit? I think there is merit for some. I think the merit is derived by motivation, meaning
Hmm.
I have seen patients in my clinic who've come to me and said, "My sleep's terrible. You got to help me. I bought this thing and it's not helping." Well, what exactly did you think was going to happen when you put that on your wrist? Like, it was going to send a signal from your wrist through your arm up to your brain and fix your sleep? I mean, I do
That
feel like,
that may happen one day.
right. Yeah, I'm sure it will. Um, I think some people, that's kind of what they're believing,
Yeah.
that so they've bought this $200, $300, $400 piece of equipment without a lot of thought as to why. It's just a panic buy. I'm struggling. Somebody on a TV show had this thing, and so I bought it.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that for the people that it can be helpful, one, as we talk about 8 hours, how much sleep do you need? Well, this could be an interesting way to sort of figure that out. So you put it on, and just forget about it. Just wear it. And then at the end of a month, you can, kind of go into sort of your, let's see here if I can find mine real quick.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been
Well,
a
one
little
thing.
rough lately just because of travel. But when you actually look at a month, it'll sort of kind of show you all your different, and it'll say, okay, this is how much you've been sleeping. six
Uh-huh.
hours and 27 minutes on average during the weekdays, about 6 hours and 20 during the weekend. I think that's probably a little low from what I'm really doing right now, just because of some other issues. But it gives you at least a sense of, okay, well, that's not 8. So maybe I'm closer to more like a 7 or
Mm.
6:45 kind of person. So it just gives you a little piece of information over a long period of time. And the other
Mhm.
place I think that they're helpful is when you're asking it specific questions. Hey, I feel like I sleep terribly at my girlfriend's house, but when I'm in my own apartment, I feel great. So we'll take a look. Or if somebody says to me, Chris, I hear what you're saying, but I just sleep a whole lot better if I drink a lot of beer before I go to bed at night. Okay, fair enough. Why don't you do 2 weeks of drinking zero beer before you go to bed and 2 weeks of heavy drinking of beer before you go to bed? And look at the data you're getting from whatever tracker you're using, understanding that they're not perfect, but they can often show some interesting sort of patterns in terms of, wow, yeah, you're right, I've got a lot more wakefulness in my little graph or whatever than I do when I don't drink the beer. Because for a lot of people, the effects of caffeine, beer, exercise before you go to bed, whatever, are not necessarily apparent to you. Like, you don't feel them. You just feel like, oh,
Mm.
that night felt as good as the other night. So sometimes I can give you a little bit deeper insight into those kinds of things. But I think for the most part, a lot of people have them. They just don't really know what they're doing. And I think if it's something that's going to stress you, if you feel like, oh gosh, now I've got this thing on and I need to sleep well. Oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping. I'm gonna screw up my streak of 7 days of getting 8 hours. Whatever these things do to incentivize you. I think that can be a problem. Kelly
Mhm.
Barron's a researcher who coined the term orthosomnia. People who, when they start tracking their sleep, it makes them inherently nervous, and it actually worsens their sleep. And there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety in the world of sleep. I always
Yeah.
tell people, ask me, what's the number one sleep tip? Just be equally happy in bed awake as you are asleep. Like, I mean, I go to bed, I don't care what happens. I love sleep, but it just, if you're saying, Chris, I've seen the future and you're going to get in bed tonight and be awake for an hour before you go to bed, I don't care. I like being in bed awake. It doesn't. So when you start pulling anxiety into the bed with you, bad things happen. And if the watch or the aura ring is going to do that to you, you might want to avoid it.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think we can spend some more time talking about the belief in which you, I guess,
Belief is
uh,
big in sleep.
yeah, what it- or a negative sense.
Absolutely.
It's so important to think about, and you touched on some examples of, yeah, if you're anxious because, like me last night, I was in bed and it must have been an hour goes by and your sense of time disappears as well, so you make
It
all these
does.
ideas
Yes.
up of like, oh, I didn't sleep last night. Well, that statement, you're signaling to your body that you've not rested when you probably have. You just were awake for a little longer, maybe an hour. And I feel like, because I knew you had you on the podcast, there was subconscious things happening, like I need a great night's sleep tonight so I can just, show
That's
up
right.
better for that. But it's all these little things. They do play into, yeah, our behavior.
What you said is very important, that our perspective and ability to sort of judge time at night is really bad.
Mm.
And it's problematic. It's like you said, it's interesting that you said that, because you're like, oh, that was a really, but your interpretation is, yeah, but I probably still rested and slept more than, and for a lot of people, that anxiety and stress really distorts time. And so you've got the impression that you didn't sleep last night. You just were in bed for 8 hours, just sitting there, stressed out about the performance, the job, the presentation, whatever. And when you couple that perception distortion with understandings about sleep, or at least surface level, I've got to sleep or else I will be unhealthy and have bad things happen to me. Then you start to establish this terrible cycle of, oh gosh, well, then tonight I've got to get good sleep because last night I didn't. And so if I don't, I'll get dementia or have a heart attack. And then people can really go off the edge with those kinds of things when they're not able to sort of center and relax and understand that, yeah, this is a bad night happening, but it's probably not as bad as I think it is, and it's going to be okay. Like, so we don't have that conversation in the media a lot. I don't think it's always kind of gloom and doom sort of stuff. Like, if you don't get this terrible thing happens, and that's the end of the 300-word story in the
Mm.
newspaper.
Yeah, and we'd also rather have something external to fix our broken selves, because we don't sometimes believe
Right.
in the power that we have within.
Like
Um,
100%.
so what are some tools that people can do if they are overthinking, if they are, you
Hmm.
know, anxious about their sleep, and they just can't move away from that?
Yeah, and that's hard. I think the first acknowledgement is that it's beyond hard for some people. I mean, I in one of my podcast episodes, I talked about insomnia. A helpful way to think of insomnia sometimes is thinking of it as sort of a trauma. So, and that's sort of in direct opposition to the statement, it's impossible not to sleep. Everybody sleeps. If you're a human and you're listening to this podcast, you sleep. There's no way you can't. And that's important too, because when we deal with people who struggle with their sleep, or people dealing with people who are struggling to sleep in a certain way, we're never dealing with people who can't sleep. That's not something that really exists in nature. Although somebody told me when I was out in LA, there is a man who lives somewhere in Asia. His name is like Fu Nok or something like that. That he hasn't
Mhm.
slept in 50 years.
Yeah, I hear about
That he
this.
has, yeah. So I need to look this up. So maybe what I'm telling people is, so
Is
it's so
is he meditating in a cave, and that's
I
his,
have no idea. I have no idea. So I'm just throwing that out there that, listen, I'm wrong all the time. So if you're listening to this podcast and this guy thinks he's right all the time, no, no, no. I think I'm wrong most of the time, but and certainly can be corrected. But
I
anyway,
think you should
but
go
sleep
visit this
happens.
guy.
I am. Somebody said it's like, what was the M. Night Shyamalan movie? Unbroken and Glass, like they were the nemesis of each other. The Bruce Willis character and then the
Uh-huh.
Samuel L. Jackson. So when he and I enter the cave together, we explode because we're the opposite. So, but for the most part, sleep's happening, and I've been in the field for 30 years now. If you're asking me, tell me all the stories about the people that you've encountered who can't sleep, we're done. That was the end of the story because there are none. In fact, most people sleep far more than they think they do. So it's important to have that confidence that
Mm,
there may be things we need to work on with your sleep or you need to improve, but this idea that you need to do something, or to your point earlier, take something, or else you're not going to sleep. There's a lot of people who listen to a podcast right now have got a melatonin gummy bear in their hand, or CBD, a prescription pill for sleep. Asking yourself the question, why are you taking that? If the answer is, well, if I don't take this, I won't sleep, it's not true. And if you don't believe me, go to the prescribing doctor who's giving it to you and say, I heard this guy on Chris's podcast who said that this pill you've been giving me for the last 15 years, I don't really need it to sleep. See what they say. Don't take my word for it.
mm,
So, it's important that you have to start to build with knowledge first. You have to truly believe some of these things, because the knowledge base is where getting out from under the anxiety helps. I mean, if you told a
mm,
kid, look, hey, when you go into the football game today, I've given you a magic ball, and wherever just kick it, no matter where you kick it, it will magically go into the goal. Like, it'll completely change the way they would play,
mm,
playing out of fear. I'm scared I'll make a bad pass. I'm scared I'll do this or that. So the psychology of sleep is dramatic. It's
mm.
it's all a confidence game, and how
Yeah,
you approach it. So, and that takes time to kind of unravel with people.
yeah. It reminds me of Space Jam when Michael Jordan. He puts water in a bottle and then goes, "It's Michael Jordan's secret stuff." And then they play the game of their lives for like the next half, and then they realize he was like, "It was just water. You have this in you. You have this in you. You
Yes,
have to believe." And then they just
absolutely.
go out and just like they're terrible
I
because they.
told my kids that one time there was some Italian beverage. It comes in a little glass bottle about this big. It's like
Mhm.
bitters or something like that. I don't remember. I went to get pizza and they were selling it at this little Italian restaurant. I was like, "What is this?" They said, "Oh, it's like an Italian beverage. It's a really strong kind of soda." But it looked like a chemical, like something that, and I bought a couple of them just to try them. And when we got to the little swim meet, I was like, my kids were like, "What is this?" I'm like, it's like this secret swimming stuff. I wouldn't drink it because it makes you swim super fast. And like, "Oh, but we want to drink it. It'll help it." Like it was so great. And, they had a really good meet and their lips were like stained orange from this stuff or whatever. But yeah, no, I think the sleep's all, I mean, and it's interesting. You bring up a really good point again. When you look at, I'm always fascinated by the very positive and very negative reviews of my book. Um, and when you look at them, like read a few really bad Amazon 1-star reviews, and now read a few of the 5-star reviews, and it doesn't take you long to see there's a theme that develops, which is, oh my gosh, like I never thought of it this way. This has been revolutionary, eye-opening, whatever their words are. Not because anything I really wrote in the book is that profound. It's they start to get it. And they probably could have gotten it with 5 other books about insomnia. There's some really good ones out there if you're like, I don't really want to read his. Um, and it's just amazing because you can see it. It's like a light bulb. Oh my God. I, it was there all along. I was just not thinking about it the right way. I wasn't going about it the right way. But it's not like, oh, I started doing more cardio and less strength training, and I was taking these supplements instead of those, and now I'm sleeping better. No, it was all there. And I tell people all the time, if there's a spectrum of sleep, horrible sleep and great sleep, you're probably just like right here, right next to the great sleep. You're not way over
Mhm.
here. And it's just going to take a few little things that you need to change about the way you approach
Mhm.
sleep or think about sleep, and you'll be there.
Mhm.
Versus your grandfather who walks into the house, sits down, and falls asleep immediately on the couch. He's he's not sleeping well, even though everybody thinks grandpa's the best sleeper on the planet because he can sleep anywhere. And that's a
Mm.
weird media construction that we've created. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, there was a lot of normalized things that have happened, I guess, over the years that I've guessed attached just from like snoring, sleep apnea. Like we've normalized that it's like this Homer Simpson funny, very casual, like, yeah, snoring, you're just making a noise. It doesn't mean anything.
That's right.
But it's like how detrimental to our health. It is a clear sign that we it's like the risk of cardiovascular health just from that, right?
Yep.
Um,
We that was I think that was, if it wasn't the most popular, it was one of the most popular podcasts we did, was just on snoring.
mm,
And you're exactly right that we often link snoring to sleep apnea, but
okay.
snoring all by itself is a risk factor for a lot of really negative things. So it's like you said. I mean, I always hear about sleep divorces. Well, my partner snores, so I sleep in the guest bedroom, or I've got earplugs or a sound machine, and those are fine. But what would be really great is if you could convince your snoring partner to go maybe get assessed and take a look at that, because there's a lot of doctors out there who would probably say, and Dale Bredesen is this UCLA doctor who thinks Alzheimer's essentially could be prevented if we just really paid attention to blood sugar abnormalities early, not waiting until they reach this kind of critical level before you say, oh, now you've got diabetes. You didn't last 6 months ago, but now you do. So now we're going to take your blood sugar seriously. And snoring is probably another one. I mean, if somebody snores really loudly, that in of itself could be just degrading the nature of your sleep and your recovery just enough. Multiply that over 20 years, and you've got somebody who, when they're in their 70s, looks very different if they had taken care of their snoring versus if they hadn't.
Yeah, powerful, powerful point. I think it's when I, yeah, when I give some homage to my dad. I'll bring my dad in here because I doubt he'll listen to this. I bought him a sleep kit for Christmas because he's the hardest guy to get anything for. But I basically got him this kit. It had blue light blockers, it had nasal strips, it had micropore tape. What else did I have? Earplugs, eye mask. Like it was the biohackers essentials. And he of course didn't know what to do with it and didn't really, he has to believe that it's going to work as well. But he didn't give it the time of day. And in a few days I think some people came over and took one bit, some tape, and I don't know, it kind of disintegrated quite quickly. But yeah, I guess on that, he snored for over 20 years. I mean, as long as I've known him, he snored. And it's I think it's really hard for someone to change or to go, okay, this is an issue if it's been a part of their lives for so long. It's almost
For
like the
sure.
person drawing their attention to it. And this gets into to many other things about us as humans, but when someone points it out, it's almost impossible to fathom whether that's like a problem. And then you know, get into other things. I think he just blames my mum. It's not me, it's her. And then like they're
No,
both
that's
doing it.
that's common. I love that's a great. Do you snore? Well, no, but my wife says I do. I
Yeah,
always
it's
love
fine.
that answer. That says so much. But nobody wants to interact with doctors. I mean, I'm a doctor. I don't want to interact with doctors, socially or professionally. I mean, it's not great. Whatever. So I get it. And there's also this sort of element of, well, my grandfather snored and he lived to be 106 or whatever the stories people tell you. And it's just
90-year-old smoker debate.
right, exactly. Nobody thinks, but it's so sad. Like I've always thought that I would take like a video and do a little 45-second montage of all just older guys. Women do the right thing all the time. They're great. Men are just stubborn and difficult and proud and whatever. So I wanted to make this little, quick montage of all these guys who always say the same thing, which is, "Oh God, Chris, if I had known how good I would have felt, I wish I would have come here 10 years ago." They always say, "I wish I would have come X years ago." And so I
Uh-huh.
just have this vision of a thing. Okay, before you leave, Mr. Smith, I'm going to show you this real quick. And I pull up my phone and I play it. I wish I would have come 5 years ago. I wish I would have come 7 years. Man, I wish I would have been here 10 years ago. Just one after the other, and
Mm.
then let that person leave because it's so common. Nobody ever says, "Well, I was talking to somebody and they said over the last six
Yeah.
weeks I've been snoring more, and here I am. What should I do?" It's
Mm.
years they wait before they come, and then they feel so much better when they get treated for their apnea
Yeah.
or whatever. It's always sad. Like they have this a certain sadness about them that's, man, I had no idea that I could feel this good. Nobody ever said that, or at least I wasn't hearing them.
Yeah, that's what I get from you, actually. I don't get someone who's trying to sell anything. You believe that the things you know do good things for people, and you're humble about it. You're like, look, it's here if you want it, but I'm not like pushing, and I'm not like trying to sell you something, and like get you. You're comfortable knowing you're in your truth, you know?
Yeah, well, it's funny you said that. One of my sort of clinical, I don't know, sort of, I think about this a lot. There was a patient I was treating for narcolepsy, and I thought a certain medication would help her a lot. And I told her, and she said, "I don't really want to take that." And I was like, "Okay, it's fine." And so, 2.5 years later, I finally convinced her to try. I said, "Just try it. If you don't like it, if it's not really setting your world on fire, just stop it. It's no big deal. But I feel better if you." So finally, after 2.5 years, she tried it. She came back and she came into the clinic and just had a weird energy about her, not a good energy, and wasn't looking me in the eye and answering all my questions very curtly. But I was saying, "How do you feel?" "Great." "Do you like the medication?" "Yes, it's amazing." And so finally I said, "You just seem, are you upset? You seem upset with me." And then she looked me right in the eye and said, "I am upset with you because I feel like you let me waste 2.5 years of my life because you knew if I took this drug, it would make me feel amazing. And you let me go, 2.5 years without trying it." I said, "Well, you're right." I said, I can't argue with that. I said, I probably maybe should have pushed a little harder, but I always want a patient to come to a conclusion
Mm.
rather than me deciding it for them. Now, I inherently have information that you don't. I have experience and information, but you're you. And so we've been talking about this drug for a while, and I just didn't feel right pushing. Plus, I think a lot of doctors believe that if I'm pushing you into something you don't feel comfortable with, there's going to be a problem with it.
Mhm.
You know, a side effect. Oh, it makes me feel, I don't like the way it makes me feel. Like, I want my patients excited about whatever they're going to do, and feel like we've come to that conclusion as a team, not I told you. I always liken this to the mechanic when I go take my car in and he comes out and he brings me like a part. Well, you can see right here your carburetor's all black here, and that's from the such and such. And then you can see this thing right here. I'm like, man, I have no idea what you're showing me. You could be showing me a part of a lawnmower or a hair dryer. I Listen, you just do your job. I appreciate you trying to bring me into the decision making process, but our inherent knowledge of the subject is too broad. The gulf is too wide that you're never going to. So you just do what you need to the carburetor. I trust you completely. But it's nice that we're trying to make a decision as a team, even though I don't know what he's holding in his hand.
Mhm.
So anyway, I think that those things are really important for people to try to feel like they're in control of these things, and nothing's more important than sleep and snoring. I think that, feeling control, um, and knowing that there's some really great treatment options out there that don't involve, necessarily this big thing on your face, even though the big thing on your face is saving people left and right all over the place.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah, I think it's important. And also just to be truthful, you couldn't play out both scenarios of that story. You couldn't do it. And who's to say if you did push it even more, she'd resent you
That's
further
right.
down the
That's
line,
right.
or like wouldn't feel in control, would need you to tell her what to do more. It's just you just can't play it
Correct.
out.
Right. You can. And so now I talk to patients who are delaying things. I often tell them that story. So
Mm.
I'm still not going to necessarily change what I do, but I do often say, listen, I'm going to tell you a story about a patient who was doing something similar to you. And when it worked really well, she was actually frustrated with me. Maybe
Mm.
she was
Yeah.
frustrated with
Here's the
herself that
video.
this happened. Here's the video. Exactly. Yeah. So, I learn every day for sure.
Mhm. So one of the things that came up a lot when I said I was sleeping with, I was speaking to a sleep expert, almost. One thing that came up a lot was the sleep wake cycles, and that if you're
Mhm.
waking up middle of the night. Have you heard of the study that was done on three hunter-gatherer hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah, was it Dr. Jeremy Sigal?
Yep.
What's your take on this?
Yeah,
So it
I
was
put
three.
that. I think I put some of that in one of my books. I referenced that. I feel
Uh-huh.
like it was in my first book, but I don't know. It seems like I was looking at that more recently. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, um, and and it sort of divides into sort of two different topics almost. One is, waking up in the night, and that that was one of the the first Monday of every month, as we do a podcast episode every week, the first Monday of the month we always do something related to insomnia, just because it's such a massive topic. And so
Mhm.
that was episode 15, waking up at night. So episode 15 sort of treats that as a medical disorder. Okay, what if you're somebody who you're always waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, can't get back to sleep? And so we kind of think about that and the way you sort of approach it. And then last week's episode was on polyphasic sleep, which is individuals who either intentionally or not are dividing their sleep into multiple periods around a 24-hour cycle. So the average human is probably a monophasic sleeper. They go to bed at 11, they get up at 7. That's one, phase or one period. I would argue that nobody's a monophasic sleeper because humans wake up at night. We wake up a lot, even if you're not aware of it. So this idea that we're seeking continuous sleep, it's never going to happen. We're not. That's not the way we built. We're constantly having little arousals and awakenings during the night that kind of punctuate our existence. But the bigger point is, if somebody says, "Look, I go to bed, I sleep for 4 hours, I wake up for an hour, and then I go back to sleep again," is that pathological? And when you look at quality sleep, if we went out to the mall and took your microphone in your van and went to a place where there's a lot of pedestrians and said, what's good sleep? How do you know it? Who's getting good sleep, who's not? I can almost guarantee you that people are going to answer people who fall asleep fast are good sleepers, and
Hmm.
people who don't wake up during the night are good sleepers. Those will be the two most common answers on the poll, most likely.
Mm, sure.
And I don't think they're good answers at all. It's kind of like what makes somebody a good eater or somebody who's really values nutrition. It's somebody who eats their dinner really fast, and it's somebody who never takes a break to have a conversation during the meal. Like that's kind of what they're saying is essentially that doesn't make any sense when it comes to food. And it makes very little sense when it comes to
Hmm.
sleeping too. So there's a great book called "It Days Close: An Evaluation of Nights Past" or something like that by a guy named Roger Eckerk. And he did this sort of historical analysis. He's a professor of like history. He's not a sleep doctor. Going
Mm.
back to like the Middle Ages and all the way up through the Industrial Revolution, and said this idea of monophasic sleep is a relatively new one, that we used to always sleep sort of polyphasically in the past.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, I'm not a medical doctor, but I do wonder if we are suppressing a typical behavior that really should be allowed to be, present if somebody wants it to be. So could you say to that person, okay, so you go to bed at whatever, you sleep for 4 hours, you wake up, you're up for an hour. Great. Sounds like you're doing what your body intended it to do versus, oh, wow, well, here, you need to take this pill
Yeah.
because if you take this pill, it'll keep you from waking up and everything will be great. Excuse me. So it's really interesting. And if you also look at animals across the entire spectrum of animals, none of them really have monophasic sleep. I mean, that is really sort of almost exclusive to humans. If you have dogs in your house, do they monophasically sleep? No, they're like running around chasing after stuff and
Yeah.
playing, and then
They
they're
don't
asleep on
attach
the couch.
they don't attach a story to it, that's for sure.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, the deer that's like walking around in your backyard, traumatized by their inability to sleep. Like there's a lot of things about this that are really human constructions, and so insomnia is not the inability to sleep. It's a person who's not sleeping when they've decided they want to. Is part A. Part B is you're upset about it. So we're the only people that really have insomnia because that upset part has to be present. So I suspect when a cow lies down and doesn't fall asleep, she's just like, all right, well, I'll just eat some more grass. I don't care, or the cow will just stretch out and rest and not be
Mhm.
too worried that sleep isn't happening. So it's, the higher level thinking that we have about sleep sometimes can really be problematic.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Do you talk about seasons and whether we should, really dial in and tune into time of the year, maybe the time of the month as well for women? Like, does this impact, um, your education to people around like winter? Yes. And in that study, the doctor Jeremy Segal, he analyzed these three tribes. I think it was like over 1,000 days, right? Hadza, San people, and Tisme, three different geographical locations. And he said there was a 53-minute difference in the winter of their like overall sleep. But their sleep wake cycles in the tribes, that there was no one time where everyone was asleep at the same time. They'd just be up and down. But again, no story, no like, oh, it's dark, I should be asleep. Everyone else is like, is this.
That's right. No, and obviously in the past it might have been advantageous for sleep to be happening in that way, just in terms of defending against predators and
Mhm.
being alert to certain things. Like they didn't have fire alarms in that
Yeah.
in that culture. So no, I think that seasonal effects are tremendous, and if you look at the sleep of individuals who live near to the poles versus equatorial sleep is very different.
Mhm.
We have a lot of controversy about daylight saving time and how we necessarily need to adjust clocks. There's nothing we could make it such that when it's noon on our watch and we walk outside and look up, it's a black sky. Like we just sort of alter things to fit sort of societal norms. So all these things are really important, and they have direct meaning and impact on individuals who, you know, if they're not able to achieve the sleep that's necessary for their job that requires them to be there at 5:45 in the morning, it's hard. I mean, so the whole idea of circadian rhythm disorders is really important in terms of, I used to work the night shift, but now I've been moved to days and I'm really struggling, or vice versa. This idea that we all have intrinsic rhythms in our body, but not necessarily a societal or work environment that allows those to be expressed. It's always interesting to see what happens with people's sleep when they retire. And now I've got no kids in the house, I've got no
Mm.
job, I can sleep when I want to, and how that looks very positive for some people, very negative and sort of unmooring for others. So, yeah, I
Mm.
mean, and that was the little tweet I sent out about right before we did the polyphasic sleep. I just had a picture of all these animals and said, are all these animals wrong and human monophasic sleep is right? Like, is that what have we evolved? Like, our sleep is evolved, or is actually we've forced ourselves into a box that's not healthy and not evolved? And would it be better if we all just sort of woke up and, saw some patients? But now I'm tired, so I'm going to take a little nap, and then I'll wake up and see some more patients. I'll eat when I feel hungry. I'll not eat when I don't feel hungry. Like, should we be behaving more like a gazelle, or shove every man, woman, and child into this sort of box of
Mm.
sleeping during the day is good and sleeping during the night is good and sleeping during the day is bad? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because if you look to nature, look to natural world, and you look to the humans that exist in the natural world, it's like the human zoo, as my friend Tony Riddle calls it. It's we operate in that human zoo, so we're not out in nature anymore. We don't operate very much on the
That's
whole
right.
in
And that's
in that
problematic.
season.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
don't see light the way we were intended to see light. We don't experience
Mhm.
the rise and fall of temperature the way we were supposed to. And these have very direct impacts on sleep.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, sleep, oversleeping, like it's a thing. So how do we recognize when, of course, I don't like getting into specific specifics because it's a general question, but there are let's my point of view then. I actually struggle with sleeping. If I oversleep, there's like a fine line between being more tired but getting the right amount of sleep. Is there
Mhm.
anything that I can do to understand that a little bit better? Or is it really just like experimenting and just like keeping your sleep, trying to be as best you can with the same time, going to bed, same time, getting up as best you can? And then
Yeah,
you'll
for a
you'll
lot of
get closer
people,
to it.
yeah, I think the waking at the same time is helpful. Again, um, a lot of people who oversleep, they have to get up at 6 a.m. every day for, whatever. And I still believe that schedule is helpful. It's just about finding the right schedule for you around a 24-hour period. But I do find that a lot of people say, on the weekends, I wake up at 6 and I don't have to get up to go to work. So I kind of roll over and go back to sleep. I eventually wake up at 7:30 and feel terrible.
Mm,
So I think for a lot of people, it's probably a good idea. Your body is used to getting up at a certain time. It's used to seeing light at a certain time. It's used to eating your, muffin and having your coffee at a certain time. So it's good to preserve that. And then as the day goes on, if you're kind of like, I really don't feel as enthusiastic and as rested as I would like, then take a nap. I mean, again, be like the animal that, they're up and they're out there grazing or whatever, but during the day, if they feel tired, they curl up underneath a tree and take a nap. And so I think that trying to maintain that wake period is really important. It's hard, when you got a weekend. Why would you want to get up at 7 a.m. when you could sleep until 10? But you don't meet a lot of people who are like, man, when I sleep in until 10, I feel great. They often feel worse in a weird way because your body's just 5 days out of the week is not used to that. You're used to getting up and you're at your
mm,
work and you're busy and your body is making circadian preparations for that. So to
Mhm.
not do that on a particular day and sleep until 10 when your body's used to having already eaten and been up
Mhm.
and it's hard. So I always find that it works best for people to keep their morning routine structured, but have built-in times during the day to nap if you need them.
Yeah.
You know, almost like an appointment. I've got a 10 a.m. Nap appointment and a 3 p.m. nap appointment. And if you're at 10 a.m. rolls around and you feel great, you're like, I feel so good right now, I don't want to nap, then don't.
Mm.
But you've missed your appointment. Now, if at 2 o'clock you're thinking, oh, I really need a nap now, you got to wait until 3. Kind of like what you would do with an infant, trying to keep those things somewhat structured. It was a great experiment where people gave individuals a candy bar, and one group got the candy bar every day at 3 p.m. The other group got the candy bar at random times. And the metabolic consequences were much worse to the group getting it at random times. The group that was always getting the candy bar at 3 p.m., it's like the body
Yeah.
knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Insulin was doing appropriate things, glucose was doing appropriate things. The candy bar had very little effect on overall metabolic sort of parameters. The random candy bar, being surprised upon the body at various times was very problematic.
Mm. Yeah, and there's random times they might be doing other things. Also, like back to what you're saying about animals, you don't see any animals eating on the move. Yet,
Right.
yet
That's
we
right.
we've begun to do that, right? It's a time to
That's
rest and
right.
digest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so yeah, I also want to touch upon light because obviously if we don't, we're missing a missing a
Yeah.
big
Well, you
thing
you
people
mentioned
think about.
the human zoo in the sense that
Hmm.
light's dramatically important, as is temperature, to sort of regulating the timing of our sleep. We think of a circadian rhythm, it's this 24-hour rhythm that we're looking for cues to always be aligning. The rhythm's intrinsic. So even when we're in a dark cave, we sort of maintain the rhythm. It starts to drift a little bit, but
Hmm.
we'll still have it. It's we're not dependent upon the sun, but the sun and rising and falling temperatures are very important for a light. It's like a watch that your grandfather gave you that works, but it's a little slow or a little fast, maybe fast in the case of a circadian rhythm. So after a day or two, you always take a look at it, like, oh wow, I'm 15 minutes off, and you find that you look on your computer and you adjust your watch because you really like the watch. It's just kind of annoying that it's not perfectly on time because it's sort of an
Hmm.
old binder watch. So that's kind of the circadian rhythm, that the more we expose ourselves to light, the more we see rises and falls in temperature and all the things that we would experience if we lived outside. I've got a patient who lives in a tent. He will come in the wintertime and do some things. He's got access to a shower, but by and large lives in a tent.
Hmm.
And I swear to God, the guy is 70 years old and he looks like he's 40. He's
Wow,
very,
is that Rich
very
Roll? Is he
deliberate.
70? Really?
Oh, I think so. No, I mean, he's very old and he still lives out in
Wow.
a tent, and he like, wrangles cattle and stuff. I mean, he's just,
Uh-huh.
it's just so interesting to see. And he meditates a lot, and he'll
Yeah.
spend a week every month not eating. And, he just does some really interesting, curious things. But
Hmm.
I've always looked at him as his exposure to the outdoors is probably
Yeah.
extremely healthy, in
Yeah.
terms of what his body is experiencing all the time. But anyway, so I think light, we have to be very conscious of that, living the way we live, not in a tent, which, we can have very bright lights on at night, and are you getting a lot of light during the day, and trying to be conscious about the lighting we surround ourselves with and what we're trying to avoid, especially if you're, parents of kids and things like that, that, you got a
Mhm.
laptop in front of your face at 10 o'clock at night, there's a consequence to that. So being very mindful of that and making smart choices in terms of light can be very helpful.
Yeah. And this is blue light in particular.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, yes, I think that people are sort of moving a little bit away from vilifying blue light. That blue light might have a little bit more of an effect than other wavelengths, but um, you're just looking at light in general, full spectrum light in general is probably really important. But yeah, blue light has been shown to maybe affect these, melatonin releases a little bit more than other wavelengths. So if you have the choice of sort of a bluer light or a more red light, you see that on airplanes, when you're
Yeah.
taking off, it's blue light everywhere. When you're landing, everything's, or I'm sorry, pink light. When you're landing, it's blue light everywhere. And they're trying to manipulate that to minimize uh, jet lag.
I wish they did that in other places, public
Yeah,
places, like
really. I do too.
supermarkets in the evening or something.
Hotels and things. Yeah, supermarkets would be a great. The 24-hour supermarket would be an awesome
Uh-huh.
thing to walk into, and it's sort of dimly lit like a library in the evening, kind of almost
Yeah.
romantic. That'd be kind of a
They want you
cool
shopping and
thing.
for all night though. They don't want you to go to bed.
That's right. It's like it's like the
Anti-sleep.
casino. The casino doesn't
Yeah.
want any. They're doing the opposite of everything we're saying.
Yeah, don't they fill the room with more oxygen in casinos to kind
Mhm.
of
Oxygen, light, no windows, no cues. The recordings of jackpots being hit, even though no jackpots being
Oh
hit, just
really? Is that what
gives
that
this
was?
impression. Yeah, it gives you the impression, oh, somebody's winning. Why not me?
Everyone's winning. Um yeah, okay. So I sleep in a van. I have been for the last couple of months. And so firstly, actually, I'll say I started sleeping on the floor when I was looking into more, natural ways of living, and I thought it makes more sense to me that I sleep on the floor. People ask me how it goes, and I say, well, I sleep better, but I wake up more. Figure that one out, and they can't get their head around it. Like, well, you wake up more, but you sleep better. I'm like, yeah, I wake up to move because my body knows
Yeah.
it needs to move, and it's like sitting in a chair. It's holding your weight. The bed's holding your weight. And there was an interesting study. I forget who it was. Who did a sleep study on hunter gatherers, or it was some people that live in more natural environments, and they use their arms as pillows and things like that. But it what are your, I guess, prescriptions to people that sleep on really soft beds and like just don't move? Do you talk much about how that can affect your kind of physical health, or not? Is it something that you pay
Yeah,
attention
I don't. I
to?
mean, we talk a lot about it, in terms of bedding and
Mhm.
things that support you. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to that idea that it would be very unnatural to read a sleep study of somebody who slept for 8 hours, and they're like, "Oh my God, look, this person's been sleeping for 4 hours. They haven't awakened." So I actually don't know the answer to that. In terms
Mm.
of, we're getting back to that sort of polyphasic sleep question of what is natural and normal, and what has been sort of foisted upon us. So
Mm.
could it be that, we talk about it, I've got a watch that tells me, hey, you've been sitting quietly too long, move, this is not good. But does it suddenly become good at night? I think would be your point, like, oh, but at night, don't move for 8 hours, that's exactly what you want to do. Maybe not.
Mm.
And a lot of bad cardiovascular things happen right when we wake up in the morning, those wee hours of the morning, strokes and heart attacks and things like that. So
Interesting.
there could be sort of an inherent danger around sleeping or the awakening from sleeping. So maybe sleeping in an environment that's comfortable but not too comfortable, that keeps us kind of moving and shifting a little bit, is fine. It's that idea that you're saying, look, I wake up several times to move. It's like when you go camping. I always experience that when I camp.
Yeah.
Like I wake up more during the night, like, wait, where am I? Oh wait, I'm in a tent, and it feels like my feet are a little bit higher than my head, and this I'm sleeping on a root, or whatever. You kind of move around and get comfortable in your sleeping bag. But I always feel good the next day, even though I might have
Yeah.
been aware of my awakenings more. But awareness of awakening and total awakening may not really change. When you look at the
Mm.
person sleeping in the soft bed, they woke up, 7 times an hour. Well, so did you. It's just maybe you were more aware of it. I don't know. I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that question. It's a good one though.
Yeah, sure. So I'm living in a van now, and I say to people, I'm like, we don't experience weather for 12 hours of the day. You just don't pay attention to it. Why would you? You're in a house. You're just really not aware of the change in wind, the rain, whether it's even the temperature, right? The temperature does
Mhm.
fluctuate, and I feel it more. So I'm
Yeah.
less insulated, more isolated, but less insulated.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and I definitely sleep better, even though there is a difference, and I'm noticing it. I'm leaning into like how I feel maybe in a more vulnerable spot, because I'm not campsite or anything. And one night someone did try and get into the van, but I was actually not asleep when that happened. It was like
Yeah,
later hours of the evening, but like there is a an awareness which I'm, because I might be asleep, but there's still some subconscious behavior happening and some awareness that I know I'm in this van and I know at some point someone could try and enter or break in. So I'm noticing that I'm not sleeping that well due to that. But I thought that's quite interesting because if you look at our evolution, that would have been a more natural thing. Like we would have had
absolutely.
to.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
someone in the tribe would have stayed up and sat around the fire and kept guard. But ultimately, you're quite vulnerable anyway. But maybe that's just because for 30 years of my life, I didn't experience any kind of vulnerability. So
Yeah.
maybe it's just a rewilding kind of.
And there's always been a thought that maybe women, females sleep more like that as well too, because they were
Mm,
sort of charged with
for sure.
defending the young and taking care of them, and even making sure that the male of the whatever didn't eat the baby, whatever. So like,
Yeah, yeah.
so this idea that women after they have babies kind of sleep more like you're describing with one eye open kind of thing
Mm,
is probably perfectly normal, even though society may deem it not. We just don't know. We know so we've come so far, but still know very little about these kinds of intrinsic questions about sleep.
hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I want to do maybe a quick fire couple of questions.
Yeah,
Um, so morning routine, your sleep starts with your morning routine,
I
if you'd
think so.
agree.
Yes,
So what things can we do in the morning to make sure that we are, getting preparing for our sleep that night
yeah.
almost?
I would say light, move your body. I like to try to do a little yoga with my wife in the morning, although I'm terrible at it. But I do like the way it feels to start your day. And food, so light food, movement, social interaction, get your body temperature up. And
Hmm.
get out of your bedroom. Might be hard if you live in a van, but you can move in different spaces. Like you're in the bed, but now you're sitting at the desk, or the beds fold up, and you kind of create different spaces and different
Hmm.
rituals in those places. But I think that morning routine is very important.
Yeah, nice. And eating before we sleep, is this something that what are your thoughts and how long and
I
any
would
sort
say
of
giving
ideas?
yourself a couple hours between your last meal and when you go to bed. I think we just sleep better with more of an empty stomach, but I tell people not to go to bed hungry. If you're hungry as you're getting ready to go to bed, have a snack, but just make it a sort of a sleep promoting snack, hummus and chips, some cereal,
Hmm.
something light like that, a banana right before you go to bed, just to get that feeling, that sort of pit feeling of hunger out of your stomach. But yeah, I think going to bed on an empty stomach does improve sleep.
Mm. Yeah, another one. I wanted to get your thoughts on technology and how, I don't know if you're a parent yourself, but
I
how
am.
best can parents, what's the advice for parents in speaking to their kids about like technology before they sleep? Obviously that's back to the light situation.
Yeah. I think not. But I also think that it's becoming harder and harder to make that happen. I mean, you've got kids who all of their school assignments and homework are on a laptop. So if you
Mm.
say you can't be on your laptop for the 2 hours before you go to bed, it doesn't seem compatible with modern schooling. So I just think you have to be very conscious of it, and make sure that parents are aware of what's going on. You're using the laptop more in an open space rather than your kid saying he's working on his paper up in his bedroom, but he's actually playing Fortnite or whatever. So I just think,
Hmm.
and then having conversations and education about it. Like, look, this is not good for your sleep. So if you have to be on that laptop to do your calculus homework, wear some little blue blocker glasses or something, and just really trying to be mindful. We have little cubbies in our kitchen, so everybody plugs their phone into the kitchen. We don't have them in our bedrooms, even parents. And so trying to
Sure.
model it too, of like, look, phones are great. I use mine all the time. It's a necessary thing, but they can be bad if you're not using them properly, like many other things.
Yeah, I like the idea of just one place in the house charge things and there's no
Yeah, it's
plug
nice.
in any room.
Right. Yeah, it's great, and I think most, I have a lot of kids that when they get into that rhythm, it feels really good. I mean, there's things about these they don't feel good. Like if you really
Mm.
evaluate your feelings about them, you're like, wow, I just blew 20 minutes looking at,
Yeah,
you know, a video of a massive Lego Millennium Falcon that somebody built, which is, yeah, that's kind of cool, but like
yeah,
nothing happened in my life. Now I'm aware that somewhere out there there's a huge Lego Millennium Falcon, and I'm 20 minutes behind on the work I should be doing or spending genuine time with my
yeah.
family. So it's hard. I tell you, it's a very, very hard situation right now because these things are built to be addictive. So
Mm.
you're up for it. It's a fight. It's definitely
Yeah,
a fight.
sometimes I feel like I work for Instagram, but they just don't pay me.
That's
It's
right. That's right. No, that's exactly right. I think a lot of people feel that way.
it's hilarious. But there's some merit and gain. Circadian advantage, you coined this term, right? What
I did, yeah. And the
regrettably
public
so, no?
cannot stop talking about it. No, I'm just
Oh
kidding.
really?
No, I'm
So
joking.
funny.
Nobody cares. No, nobody uses
I
that
know
term
okay.
besides me. But yes, I did. So maybe some sports bettors out there use it, but other than that, it's pretty niche.
Yeah, what does it mean?
So it just means that we talk about home field advantage. Circadian advantage is basically which team that's playing, and there's two big football games here in the United States that are happening.
Yeah.
Which team is more aligned with the time zone they're playing. So if a West Coast team plays an East Coast team at a particular time, it's just like if you and I played a match in
Sure.
something and you flew over here and I decided to play at a time when your
Mm.
body felt like it was 3 a.m., I would have the circadian advantage, even if
Mm.
you live here, or whatever, and I don't or something. So it's whoever's in most in line with what their natural rhythm is doing has the circadian advantage. And every now and then you see weird situations where the home team does not have the circadian advantage and they lose a lot. And those are the games where bettors can really make a lot of money because it would look like, well, they're the home team and they're the visitor, but the visitor is actually much more in line with that time zone and that time of day than the other team. So bet on them or whatever. So, but that's what we
Mm.
kind of studied.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, did you write some articles for um some papers around? Do you work with professional sports teams? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's just
about 20 or 30 of them, yeah, in different leagues. And
amazing.
so and these are individuals who are, like you said, just trying to get good information about sleep and capitalize on it to make themselves sleep well. So I've been in the field for 30 years now, and I am a doctor, even though I'm not sure I'm a great one, but I am a doctor. So, those things kind of sum up where like, hey, we need a little help with our teams. We travel a lot. We've got some players who struggle with their sleep, and we need, real professional advice from somebody who's been trained and knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And breathing, nasal breathing. Is this important? How important?
I don't know. I would say I'm not a when I look at all this stuff, I'm open to anything, but I'm just kind of like, I don't really know where this is sort of coming from and the mouth
Mm.
taping and all this stuff. I mean,
Have you experimented with mouth taping
I mean,
in your sleep?
I've to some degree, yeah, but I mean, these are just holes that lead to another hole. It's like a cave that has two exits and entrance, and we found that if we have people exiting the left side of the cave, they're just so much healthier if they exit. I don't know. I think that I've not been particularly compelled by the movement. In fact, I put a little post on Twitter
Oh,
that
really?
my more
Interesting.
well, my post on Twitter was I'm writing a book called Blinking, the lost science of the new art of a lost science or whatever. Like it's blinking for God. Maybe if you blink one eye for 20 minutes and then the other eye throughout the day makes you so much happier in your life. I have no idea. Like, so I just think people need to be careful taping their mouth shut when they sleep at night. That can be a little bit of a dangerous situation, but I'll just say that in terms of the science, maybe in 20 years, people look back on this interview like, oh my God, that guy was a breathing denier. Nasal breathing denier. He had no idea. It's
Maybe.
everything now, but it just seems kind of,
Have you read
people
James
that
Nestor's
people
book?
don't. I have. I'm
Not a
not
fan.
not not a fan. I mean,
Oh,
I don't
really?
care. It's just, the thing of it is this. and here's my perspective. There are some
Yeah.
amazing books about sleep. There's some amazing books about exercise, amazing books about nutrition. Nobody gives a damn because it's not new. When you look through like a great book, what I consider to be great books, one of the most common complaints is nothing new here. So the only thing that really resonates right now with a lot of people is it's got to be new. So my guess is Chris Winter's Blinking, the lost art of a new science, or whatever I would call it, would be wildly popular. That we're doing it all wrong. Like, we got to blink this way. And what kind of blinking exercises do you do before you go to bed at night? And are you taking the time during the day to do blinking? I would come up with phrases and all kinds of cool things and find some esoteric research that has like 8 subjects in it to back it all up, and it would be well written and clever and all that stuff, and it would probably crush my other books because it's
Mm.
new, and new is what people want versus no, just do these things that we know work and move on with your life. I mean, I'm
I guess
incredibly practical. So
depend. No, but I appreciate you talking about this as well. Because for me, I am on the side of the fence where the science is catching up with what we've always known in terms of breathing. And when you look at certain animals that live a long time, that they breathe through their nose, and we've known this in ancient traditions and in Chinese wisdom and all these things. That's why the book was called what you just said. It's like the lost art of the thing. It's like
yeah,
something that we've forgotten and we've moved in due to diet and exercise and fitness and stuff, and we've gotten to more mouth breathing, let's say. I'm on the side that the science is inarguable.
I don't buy it. I'm sorry.
Really?
Yeah,
No, I love someone that I don't
this
agree with on it.
I don't. I mean, I breathe through my nose. I mean, it's just anyway. Like, yeah, we'll know. We're gonna know in 40 years when people start living to be 130 because they've got duct tape on their face, right? Like, go for it. Like, hey, I'm here to. I am here to be. I'm here to be wrong, and I'm here to learn.
Yeah,
But I mean, and again, does Western science have the answer to everything? They absolutely do not.
yeah.
But I just, again, yeah, it should be a very easy thing to prove, right?
Mm,
It's like, people who live in ice buckets. It's going to be very easy to prove because we've proven it with cigarettes.
mm,
Yeah, put these in your mouth and breathe through your mouth with this thing on fire, and you will
mhm.
probably have much more cancer, much more.
Yeah,
So anyway, I'm like I said, that's my personal opinion. I'm not telling my patients go tape your mouth shut. I don't
yeah,
even understand. So but anyway, like I
yeah,
said,
yeah. No, it's good. It's
hey,
good to talk.
I'm
It's
into
good to talk about.
mindfulness. I think you should be mindful. I think you should meditate. I
Yeah.
think you should time to, I think you should eat well. But
Mhm.
so I just, I'm not, if you want to do it, it's your mouth, it's your
This is
tape.
true. It's
That's
my day.
right.
Nice, man. Let's leave it on that bombshell. I think, well,
Sounds
bombshell
good.
maybe for a few of my listeners who are definitely mouth tapers.
That's right. Somebody, I'll leave you with this. Um, I would, it was somebody was asking me a question, and I was like, so "What do you think about mouth taping?" I said, "I'm more into butt taping for IBS." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" It's like you tape your butt when you have irritable bowel syndrome. It works really well. So that went over really well, as you can imagine. But yeah, yeah. Hey, listen, like I said, I'm not here to provide everybody with
Yeah,
answers. Just my experience. So anyway, good luck
absolutely.
to you.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
And
if
and
you
I and
put,
I'm and I'm wrong all the time. So maybe in 10 years I'll be back here like let's replay that interview back in 2023 when I was like disparaging mouth taping, and I'll be the first to apologize. I'm not a proud man.
yeah, man. Oh, that's why I love you and I got you on. I feel that. It's good, man. Awesome. All right. Well,
Hey,
I
well, have a
appreciate you,
great day. I
brother.
appreciate the time, man.
Yeah. Anything you wanna leave us on? You good? Where can
No,
people
you
find
can
you?
find me
Where
at Dr. Chris Winter on Twitter and Dr. Chris Winter on Instagram. My books are The Sleep Solution, Rested Child, and my podcast is called Sleep Unplugged.
Mhm.
And that's about it.
Awesome, man. Yeah, appreciate you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you
Hey,
diving in.
you bet, Chris. You have a good day, man.
Thank you, brother. Yes, people, well done for finishing the podcast. Appreciate you as always. Don't forget to subscribe and check out more content here.